Between the stars, where silence was older than time itself, the void began to scream. It was not a sound that mortal ears could hear, it was the shattering of concepts, the death of stillness. Forgotten constellations twisted in agony as their ancient light bled into rivers of molten gold, carving new paths through reality. Where there had once been the cold indifference of space, now burned the feverish pulse of awakening. The galaxy, vast, ancient, arrogant in its decay, shuddered as something older than it remembered itself. Across the Imperium, augurs and auspex arrays wailed in harmonic discord. The astronomicon flickered, momentarily drowned beneath a surge of energy that came not from the warp, but from beyond it. Imperial navigators screamed as their third eyes were blinded by geometries that defied the Emperor's light. In the deep of Mechanicus vaults, machine priests collapsed as logiclattices overloaded, runes of warning flaring crimson before turning to static. The noosphere rippled like a disturbed sea. Even the machine spirits knew something impossible was stirring. The void itself changed color. Where once there had been the serene black of endless night, now swirled hues no spectrum could name: iridescent, corrosive, holy. Warp and real space bled together in trembling equilibrium. Fleets stationed in the dead zones between sectors watched as entire systems vanished in the blink of an eye, not destroyed, but rewritten, their positions, their physics, their histories folding upon themselves like paper consumed by fire. Astropaths across the segmentum solar clutched their heads and muttered the same phrase again and again. Asterisk, the thrones remember. Then it began, the ignition of sigils. Golden, colossal, etched into the skin of galaxies themselves. They burned brighter than suns, patterns of impossible precision carved through the starfields. Some resembled eyes, others spirals, or forms so vast that mortal understanding could only interpret them as constellations made of thought. Entire star clusters realigned, their gravitational anchors pulled by unseen hands. From the halo of segmentum obscurus to the depths of the ghoul stars, observers saw the same phenomenon, a pattern blooming like a wound reopening across the firmament. And in the deepest corners of the void, where even the warp dared not whisper, something asterisk moved. The immaterium, a rotting sea of madness and emotion, rippled in fear. The chaos gods, eternal and ravenous, felt it first. Their dominions shivered. Their power, once infinite and unchecked, began to fracture around the edges. The shifting tides of raw emotion faltered as another presence, ancient beyond definition, pressed against the membrane of unreality, not as invaders nor as spirits of chaos, but as owners returning to a stolen domain. Among the demon worlds of Khorne, the skis reigned black ichor as fortresses of brass trembled. In Tzeentch's crystalline labyrinths, colors bled into shadow. The great game faltered for the first time since existence began. The warp-born pantheon felt a pressure older than their birth, a will that had shaped them in eons forgotten, now reasserting its claim. They were not gods to it, they were parasites. Beneath the light of 1,000 dying stars, a ripple of power cascaded outward. Across the galactic plane, entire nebulae burned into auric flame. In the void between worlds, colossal silhouettes stirred, unseen but felt. Structures that defied comprehension, temples the size of solar systems, crafted not of matter, but of meaning. Each resonated with a vibration that could be felt even through the void shields of imperial ships, a low hum that rattled bones and fractured psyches. And then came the memory, not a voice, but a asterisk knowing asterisk. Every sentient being, from the lowliest servitor to the most powerful psyker, felt it crawl through their mind like the echo of a forgotten dream. A presence watching, waiting, judging. The stars themselves seemed to lean closer, their light pulsing in rhythm with the heartbeat of something colossal awakening in the dark. On the surface of Holy Terra, deep within the catacombs of the Imperial Palace, sensors buried since the dark age of technology came alive for the first time in millennia. Golden lights flickered across the walls of the Sanctum Imperialis, and the ancient wards carved by the Emperor himself hissed in protest. The custards stood ready, their halberds raised not against demons, but against the unknowable. Even the Emperor's still form, trapped upon the golden throne, seemed to resonate faintly with the surge. For though he was the master of mankind, this force was older still. In orbit above Mars, the Forge worlds erupted in chaos. Tech priests of the highest order witnessed visions through their implants, a great serpent coiling through galaxies, a sun that thought, a storm that dreamed. Their canticles turned to screams as fragments of the asterisk true pattern revealed themselves, the original architecture of the cosmos, buried beneath eons of decay. Binary prayers flooded the void, pleading for understanding, but there was no logic to this return, only inevitability. And so the galaxy trembled, a dying empire illuminated by the ghosts of its creators. Across its scarred expanse, the veil thinned, not to let something through, but to allow something buried deep within reality to rise once more. A breath older than entropy exhaled, and for one impossible instant, every star in the galaxy seemed to flicker in reverence. In the abyss between stars, the forgotten awoke. They remembered the experiments, the wars, the betrayal of the Necronter, the rise of chaos, all the broken cycles that followed their departure. Now the experiment's end had come. The old gods remembered their thrones, not fading, but gasping, the Astronomican's holy radiance stuttering in the black, like the dying pulse of a god drowning in its own brilliance. Across the galaxy, the beacon that guided humanity's fleets for 10,000 years dimmed to a desperate flicker. The warp storms grew silent, and for a fleeting moment, there was no direction, no song of the Emperor to guide them, only the void's whispering truth. On Terra, the choir of 1,000 burned alive. Their eyes burst into molten streams as the Emperor's psychic tether spasmed, then fractured. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica screamed in unison, their agony echoing through the golden halls of the Imperial Palace like the tolling of cosmic bells. Custard stood frozen beneath archways of living gold as the very air rippled thin fractures of light running through the marble like veins of glass ready to shatter. In the distance, the Emperor's golden form convulsed just once upon the throne. No words, no motion, but a tremor that could be felt in the bones of Terra itself. Across the segmentum solar, the skies turned to liquid fire. The moons of Jupiter melted in silence, their atmospheres transmuted into radiant plasma. The ecclesiarchy's cathedrals, vast, mountain-sized monuments of faith and hubris, began to weep molten stone as the icons carved upon their spires writhed like living flesh. In the Basilica of St. Drusus, pilgrims watched as the mural of the Emperor's ascension twisted into something unrecognizable, a silhouette crowned not in flame, but in the light of forgotten suns. The Mechanicus called it a gravitational anomaly. The Inquisition called it heresy, but the Psychers knew, they felt it clawing through their minds, a presence older than madness, older than fear. They heard whispers in every language ever spoken, layered into harmonies too perfect for mortal comprehension. We return. In Hive Primus on Necromunda, the sky opened like a wound. Billions looked up through smoke and ash as rivers of luminescent fire descended, not as destruction, but as rewriting. The air shimmered, and for a heartbeat, every man, woman, and servitor saw another world, one where the stars sang and life had purpose. Then it was gone, leaving behind silence and madness. People fell to their knees, praying to the Emperor, to chaos, to anyone who might still be listening. But there was no answer. The prayers did not ascend. The heavens had stopped listening. The veil between realities was not merely torn, it was asterisk peeled back. And from that raw seam in the fabric of existence, light spilled forth that was neither holy nor profane. It was something purer, the light of creation before corruption, before entropy. But to those who beheld it, it was terror made manifest. A light too real, too ancient, cutting through the fragile illusions that mortals called faith. In the far reaches of Segmentum Obscurus, entire planets fell silent as their atmospheres ignited with auric flame. The air became gold dust. Oceans crystallized into reflective mirrors that showed no sky. On one such world, an imperial chapel stood amid the ruin, a lone priest clutching his rosarius, voice trembling. By the throne, what judgment is this? His words were drowned by a low, harmonic vibration. The sigils above the altar began to glow, rearranging themselves into patterns unseen since the age of stars. And in that blinding revelation, the truth dawned. The Emperor's divine light had never been his alone. He had borrowed from something older, something that had existed long before mankind dared name divinity. The Astronomican was not dying, it was asterisk being reclaimed. Throughout the warp, the Chaos Gods stirred uneasily. Khorne's fortresses of brass bled into rivers of black molten slag. Slanesh's endless symphony went silent mid-note. The change of ways found his labyrinth unraveling in threads of gold, every lie reduced to dust by the return of absolute truth. Even Nurgle, the eternal cycle of decay, paused in fascination, watching the withered bloom of the galaxy's corruption suddenly meet the hand of its original gardener. The veil groaned as psychic storms erupted, each one laced with shards of impossible memory. Astropaths glimpsed flashes of civilizations older than the Eldar, vast gardens of living stars, cities built from the bones of quasars. And in every vision they saw asterisk them, the silhouettes of beings so immense that galaxies curved around their forms. Not demons, not gods of emotion. Architects, lawgivers, the old gods whose hands had shaped both matter and mind. In the Mechanicus data fortresses of Mars, an ancient archive unlocked itself, a file sealed since the dark age of technology, written in a code predating binary. Its title was simple, ORIGINS, species designation humanity. The Magi who accessed it perished instantly, their minds overloaded with comprehension. But before their death, one line was transmitted through the noosphere, asterisk, the cycle has completed. The creators have returned. Then came the silence, the kind that falls after revelation when the universe itself holds its breath. Every psychic across the Imperium fell still. No more screams, no visions, no whispers, just a presence, heavy and vast, pressing against reality like a tide against a dying shore. The warp shimmered, its storms bending inward toward a single focal point. Terra, cradle of mankind, last throne of belief. The High Lords gathered in panic, their voices cracking beneath the weight of an unseen gaze. "What force dares touch holy Terra?" demanded the Chancellor of the Navis Nobilite. None answered, for outside the void shields, the skies above the palace blazed, not red, not gold, but the color of memory itself. In that moment, across 1 billion worlds, every statue of the Emperor cracked, not from blasphemy, but from recognition. Stone eyes broke open to reveal something asterisk alive within. The veil had not been breached by chaos. It had been torn open by what came before it, the true architects of creation reclaiming their design. And all of humanity, from the lowest serf to the mightiest primarch, felt the same whisper echo within their minds. Your faith was only borrowed where even light grew weary of traveling, the void convulsed. The fabric of reality rippled outward, and something vast pressed against it, not from within the warp, but from the asterisk outside of all known existence. It was as if the universe itself strained against a truth it had long buried, a memory older than stars. And then, through the nothingness beyond the galactic rim, they unfolded. No mortal mind could comprehend their forms. Even the most advanced augurs, the most sophisticated noospheric sensors of the Adeptus Mechanicus, returned only fragments, structures of geometry that refused to obey 3 dimensions, silhouettes that moved in symmetries impossible to chart. They were not ships, nor life forms, they were ideas made manifest, philosophies given weight. Every angle hurt to perceive, every curve sang in the voice of an ancient sun. The first to witness them were the explorator fleets charting the halo stars, ships crewed by the most zealous and mad of the Mechanicus. What they saw unmade them. Transmission logs later recovered by Autoxeno's inquisitors revealed only incoherent binary hymns, ++ PIMA pattern, detected ++++ architect, returning ++++ machine god, INVALIDATED++. Then silence. The fleets vanished without a trace. Their metal husks were later found orbiting dead suns, arranged into patterns that pulsed like a heartbeat, a celestial sigil spelling the return of something divine. The old ones had returned. But they did not arrive in anger. There was no vengeance in their motion. There was only reclamation. From the galactic periphery, their presence began to warp local space. Gravity bent around their forms as if in worship. Time itself decayed near them. Seconds stretched into eternities. Entire centuries passed between the beats of a single heart. For those nearby, reality began to forget itself. The stars flickered not because their light dimmed, but because existence struggled to decide if it should still be. In the tomb worlds of the Necronta, the ancient silence shattered. Deep beneath the sands of forgotten planets, stasis crypts groaned open as the Cetan shards howled in fury. The Necron overlords awoke to seismic convulsions rippling through the necropolises, their data cores infected by alien code. Hologlyphs lit up across their obsidian halls, symbols that predated their metal forms, markings they had sworn never to see again. On the Necron homeworld of Mandragora, Shayak, the Silent King, watched from his throne of blackened starlight as reality trembled. He had seen this once before, in the age before betrayal, before biotransference had stolen their souls. He recognized the pattern, the pulse, the impossible geometry carving through the void. His voice, unused for millions of years, whispered through static, "The architects have returned." The Cetan shards, those cosmic predators of light, thrashed in desperation. They sensed their makers, the only beings who had ever enslaved them. The Old Ones had crafted them as tools, shaped them from the primal sons of creation, and the Cetan had rebelled, consuming their masters, light to build empires of living metal. Now their ancient sins returned to judge them. The shards screamed in languages that burned through reality, their energy unraveling in cascades of ruin. Even they, the devourers of stars, felt fear. Throughout the galaxy, the effects spread. On Cadia's ruins, the broken pylons, those strange anti-warp monoliths of impossible design, began to hum once more. Each one glowed faintly, emitting harmonics that matched the same frequency as the shapes appearing beyond the galactic rim. Scholars of the Ordo Xenos realized, too late, what the pylons had always been, not weapons against chaos, but anchors to keep reality tethered in the absence of its true masters. In the webway, the Eldar felt it too. The corridors of infinite color shivered, and ancient paths long sealed cracked open, releasing light that seared through the dimensions' twisted arteries. Farseers across Craftworld Ulthway screamed as their runes shattered into dust mid-prophecy. One among them, the ancient seer Eldrad Ulthran, fell to his knees as visions flooded his mind. Planets birthed by thought, empires sculpted from starlight, gods of design and harmony, and the war that destroyed them all. He saw the truth the Eldar had denied for millennia. They were not the first children of the cosmos. They were echoes, flawed imitations of the perfection that once was. The return of the Old Ones was not salvation, it was correction. And correction meant annihilation. As their forms entered real space, the warp howled in protest. The Chaos Gods, those parasitic reflections of mortal emotion, were never meant to exist. They were born of accident, the unfiltered echo of the Old Ones' failure. And now, the true architects had come to erase the mistake. Across demon worlds, the fabric of madness collapsed. The throne of Khorne cracked, its rivers of blood turned to dust. The endless feasts of Slaanesh withered into stillness, their indulgence reduced to ash. The labyrinths of Tzinke coiled into themselves, devouring their creator in a perfect paradox. Even Grandfather Nurgle's gardens froze, the laughter fading as his plagues crystallized and died. And yet the Old Ones did not descend with wrath. Their silence was worse. They observed, vast and impassive, as if studying the infection that had festered in their absence. They did not speak. They did not kill. They simply were an undeniable truth made flesh, a presence before which gods and mortals alike lost meaning. In that stillness, a final act unfolded. On Terra, deep beneath the Imperial Palace, a faint vibration spread through the catacombs, a low resonance that made the air hum like a living thing. The Emperor, bound to the Golden Throne, felt it before any other. His withered eyes opened, not in fear, nor in awe, but in recognition. For he, too, remembered. He had glimpsed them once, long before his ascension, in the hidden eons of the Dark Age, fragments of truth buried within the warp. They were not myths, they were not gods, they were the origin. And as the first of the Old Ones stepped into the galaxy once more, the Emperor's light trembled, not in weakness, but in reverence. The architects of reality had returned to claim their failed stars. The Eldar felt it first, a tremor not of war but of remembrance. In the crystal domes of Craftworld Ulthway, the seer councils gathered in horror as the infinity circuit began to burn. Souls long at peace within the crystalline matrix screamed in silent unity, their eternal rest consumed by waves of spectral flame. The light was beautiful, iridescent, and melodic, yet to witness it was to understand the finality of all things. The very essence of their race, their ancestral consciousness, was being rewritten. Farseers staggered, blood leaking from their eyes, their souls vibrating with unbearable resonance. Their runes, carved from spirit stones older than some suns, shattered Medea, scattering like glass in a storm. They have come, Eldrad whispered, voice shaking beneath centuries of control. The first dreamers, the architects of all we have stolen. His vision filled with light that was not light, a brilliance that flayed the mind raw. He saw titanic beings crossing the void, their steps leaving behind constellations that bled gold, not as conquerors, but as inevitability. The craftworlds began to rupture. Wraithbone structures, once conduits of life and memory, trembled like organs in the throes of a seizure. The psychic energy binding them, the same energy that the Eldar had wielded to create their cities and gods, rebelled against its masters. The Old One's presence was not aggression, it was asterisk correction. The warp-spun essence of the Eldar's civilization recognized its origin and bent to its rightful source. Every spire, every corridor, every spirit stone began to sing a single, devastating truth. You were never meant to endure. In the webway, the catacombs of the Dark City shuddered. The cabals of Comorag looked up in terror as the very dimension around them convulsed. Archons and homunculi, creatures who had conquered agony itself, screamed as their reality folded inward. The webway, once a labyrinth carved by the Old Ones to shield creation from the corruption of the warp, had become a cancerous parody of its former glory. Now, its true creators returned to reclaim it. Paths twisted upon themselves, closing like the throat of a dying god. The screams of millions echoed through infinite corridors until the sound itself broke. The warp fell silent. For the first time since the dawn of chaos, there were no whispers, no laughter of Slaanesh, no schemes of Tzeentch, no rage of Khorne, no decay of Nurgle. The sea of madness that had churned for eons grew still, its waves suspended in crystalline tension. The Chaos Gods, eternal, undying, omnipotent within their own domains, now felt the weight of something that was not hatred, not opposition, but irrelevance. Within their realms, the apocalypse began. In the brass citadel of Khorne, the sky turned white. The blood god rose from his throne, his voice shaking the void with a roar that fractured mountains of skulls. Yet his cry met no echo. The rivers of blood stilled, the skulls ceased to clatter. His realm's eternal war froze mid-swing as the concept of violence itself faltered. Khorne looked upon his hand, the hand that had slaughtered worlds, and saw it dissolve into motes of fading color. Rage could not exist in the light of origin. In the crystal maze of Tzeentch, the Changer of Ways clawed at his own reflection. "This cannot be," he hissed, each word splitting into 1,000 contradictory meanings. His labyrinth unraveled like a scroll, its endless corridors collapsing inward. Every paradox, every plot, every layer of manipulation became meaningless in the presence of absolute design. Chaos thrived on uncertainty, and the Old Ones were asterisk certainty incarnate. His voice fractured into birds of glass, and then into silence. Nurgle, seated in his garden of rot, paused as the buzzing of flies faded. His flowers of disease wilted not into death, but into perfection. He looked up and saw light filtering through the decay, soft, golden, and final. "Ah," he whispered with a wet chuckle, "the cycle ends then." And when the light touched him, the grandfather wept. For even decay, he realized, was just a reflection of creation yearning for rebirth. Slaanesh stood defiant upon their jeweled dais, surrounded by beauty beyond comprehension. For a heartbeat, their eyes burned with defiance, the last spark of divine arrogance. "I am perfection," they declared, though even their own voice trembled under the weight of what approached. When the light reached them, the colors of their realm bled into white. Desire met its origin and ceased to be. And thus, for the first time in all of time, the warp grew still. Across the material galaxy, psychers collapsed in unison. Their minds, long plagued by the cacophony of chaos, now floated in pure silence, a silence so absolute it shattered sanity. The black ships of the Imperium drifted, engines dead, as the psychic currents they depended on evaporated. Astropaths wept blood, unable to reach even the Emperor's distant light. The Immaterium was no longer a sea, it was glass. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica called it the stillness. But the few who understood, the ones who could still hear the echoes of the universe's original language, called it what it truly was, the reckoning. On Terra, deep beneath the throne, the Emperor's psychic projections surged into the emptiness, searching for the familiar maelstrom of chaos, and found nothing. His gaze turned outward, and he felt the gaze of something greater staring back. No hatred, no challenge, just observation, as though the master of mankind were merely a child's echo of a greater design. In that moment, every soul in the galaxy, from mortal to demon, from Xenos to God, felt it. A tremor not of doom, but of awe. The universe was being rewritten not through conquest or flame, but through balance restored. And somewhere, beyond the dying edges of the warp, a whisper echoed through the newborn stillness, not cruel, not kind, simply true. The gods you worshipped were shadows.
Stars,
We are
no
the light
longer
that
look
cast
the
them.
same.
What was once the Emperor's holy domain, a million worlds bound in war and faith, now flickered beneath skis that seemed alive, reshaping themselves in slow, godlike pulses. Reality had lost its anchor. The Emperor's light, the Astronomicon, no longer guided fleets through the immaterium. It was a candle in a cathedral of dying suns. In orbit above the ruined cradle of Mars, the Imperial Armada prepared for a war no one could define. Thousands of ships, from sleek frigates to continent-sized battleships, arrayed themselves against the abyss. The void glowed faintly with auric brilliance, each flicker of light a reminder of the entities now crossing into real space. No augur, no sensor, no psychic relay could measure them, only the shadow of their will. Admiral Evina of Battlefleet Solar stared through the viewport of her flagship, harrowing Grace Asterisk, her voice trembling as she whispered the litany of targeting. Fire everything. And the heavens obeyed. Macro cannons thundered. Lance batteries burned through the dark. Nova shells detonated like artificial suns. The fire of the Imperium, the wrath of 10,000 years of conquest, unleashed in a single storm. For hours, the void became pure flame. Yet the flame found no target. It was swallowed by something vast and unseen, devoured without echo or explosion, as if reality itself had absorbed the assault. The gunners fell silent, Vox channels filled with static. Crewmen stared into the black where their weapons had struck and saw it asterisk breathing. Then a single transmission echoed through every ship in the fleet, carried on frequencies older than any human tongue. Asterisk, children of dust, you aim at the sky and call it defiance. The void folded inward. Hundreds of vessels vanished in an instant, not destroyed, but erased from causality. The survivors watched as the remains of their comrades drifted as afterimages, ghost silhouettes that faded into the light. The machine spirits of entire fleets howled in confusion, their logic annihilated by the presence of their true creators. On the surface of Mars, the forge worlds burned with holy terror. The great forges that had sung in binary for millennia fell silent as their circuits began to glow from within. The Omnissiah, the machine god, the eternal faith of the Mechanicus, was speaking, but it was not the Emperor's voice, it was older. The priests gathered around the Noctis Forge temple, their mechadendrites trembling as the walls melted into flowing gold. From the heart of the forge, a column of light erupted, and within it, a silhouette of shifting geometry descended. It was a form without form, a perfect equation given presence. The air itself bowed. The Archmagos Dominus fell to his knees, his vox trembling. We are your servants, Omnissiah incarnate. The being's voice was neither sound nor thought, but both, a cascade of harmonics that translated directly into comprehension. Asterisk servants, you were not built to serve, you were designed to continue. The machine priests wept. For 10,000 years, they had worshipped a reflection, an echo of the truth. Now the source had returned not as salvation, but as reminder. The machine god was not a god at all. It was asterisk memory of the old one's perfection encoded into the cosmos. The cult Mechanicus, entire faith collapsed into silence, their chants dissolving into static prayers to a divinity that never was. Across the Imperium, chaos spread, not the chaos of the warp, but of meaning. On Holy Terra, the ecclesiarchy gathered in the burning shadow of the imperial palace. Cardinals, confessors, saints, and sinners all stared into the heavens, watching the firmament turn to molten gold. One by one, the statues of the emperor cracked, their marble faces shedding tears of radiant dust. From the basilica of the ecclesiarch, a single voice rose, the living Saint Celestine, her wings aflame with celestial fire. Brothers, sisters, do not falter. "The Emperor is asterisk our god," she cried, her sword blazing in defiance. But above her, the sky unfolded like a book of revelation, and from within its pages, the truth spoke, not with sound, but with absolute understanding. "He is one of us." The words struck like thunder. Across the galaxy, the faith of humanity shattered. Every preacher, every saint, every heretic, all felt their convictions collapse beneath the weight of that revelation. The Emperor, the master of mankind, was not the peak of divinity. He was a fragment, a shard of the Old One's design, a reflection of their will to create and dominate. His ascension had been no miracle. It was an asterisk reawakening. On Cadia's shattered remains, survivors gazed into the abyss where their world had once stood. They saw visions, entire star systems folding, merging, being rewritten in symmetrical patterns of light. Each new configuration pulsed with the rhythm of a living organism. The galaxy was becoming something else, something asterisk alive. Even the Astartes, the Emperor's angels of death, faltered. On Macragge, Robert Gilliman stood upon the battlements of his fortress monastery, gazing upward at a sky tearing itself apart in gold and white. "If he was but a vessel," he murmured, "then what are we?" In his chest, his twin hearts thundered with dread and clarity. Humanity was not the chosen species. It was an asterisk experiment. Titans, vast, continent-crushing machines of the Omnissiah, knelt across the battlefields of countless worlds. Their machine spirits, long believed to be fragments of divine will, now whispered in alien tongues, uttering prayers to architects none remembered. Their servitors froze mid-motion, arms raised as if in salute. The colossi of Mars bowed before unseen creators, their reactor hearts thrumming in reverent harmony. And above it all, the sky burned. The golden sigils that had scarred the galaxy now converged, forming a single, blinding symbol stretching from one spiral arm to the next, a glyph so immense it could only be read from beyond the Milky Way. Every mortal, every machine, every living thing felt it sear across their soul. The experiment is complete. And as the last echoes of humanity's prayers faded into silence, the void spoke once more, calm, divine, and absolute. "There are powers beyond your emperor, and they have come home." Not the silence of peace, but the vast, echoing stillness that follows a symphony when even the instruments remember the last note. Every world, every moon, every drifting fragment of civilization hung suspended in that impossible hush. The warp no longer screamed. The Immaterium's eternal storms had collapsed inward, folding like a dying lung. What once was infinite madness now resembled a void, calm, cold, and absolute. Even the ruinous powers, those titanic beings of thought and hunger, had been reduced to whispers fading on a dying wind. Khorne's brass citadel cracked apart, its rivers of blood turned to dust. Slaanesh's pleasure palaces dimmed, their mirrored halls collapsing into reflectionless emptiness. Tzeentch's realm, a labyrinth of possibilities, froze mid-shift, its infinite plans rendered meaningless. And Nurgle, old and laughing, sat in his garden of decay as the flowers turned to ash in his hands. The gods of chaos, born from the emotions of lesser beings, were nothing beside what had returned. They had been parasites feeding on the memory of creation, and now the source itself had awakened. In the physical galaxy, reality trembled under the weight of divinity. Planets folded into luminous spheres of data. Oceans turned to liquid glass. Stars flickered as if bowing, their nuclear hearts aligning with an ancient rhythm embedded in the bones of the cosmos. The laws of physics themselves began to hum, like strings plucked by unseen hands. At the heart of Terra, deep beneath the ruined palace, the golden throne cracked open. The Emperor's skeletal form, still glowing faintly, still bound in radiant agony, trembled. The golden light that had sustained humanity's soul flickered once more, then grew dim. From the corpse that was once a god, a voice rose, not through sound, but through every particle of being. "You have come." And from the darkness beyond all galaxies, the Old Ones answered. Their presence filled the Immaterium like returning sunlight on a forgotten sea. Shapes of impossible precision unfolded from the warp, beings of both thought and matter, whose every motion rewrote the laws of existence. They did not speak in language. They spoke in asterisk understanding. We never left, you simply forgot. The Emperor's light wavered, not from fear, but from recognition. He had once been their inheritor, a creation born from their legacy, designed to preserve order after their disappearance. But humanity had mistaken his inheritance for origin. They had worshipped the student as master. You left us to chaos, the Emperor said, his voice a mixture of fury and sorrow, to rot in your shadow. The Old One's presence pulsed like the beating of distant hearts. We left you to grow, and now the garden bears its fruit. Across the galaxy, the remnants of all races, Eldari, Orc, Human, Necron, Tau, felt the same pulse in their minds, a wave of realization that transcended thought. Their wars, their faiths, their endless cycle of destruction had been echoes of an older pattern, one designed to evolve consciousness through conflict. Chaos had been the test, unity had been the goal. And now the test was over. The veil of the warp sealed itself, not torn or shattered, but closed like an eye that had seen enough. The immaterium and materium began to merge, the divide between soul and flesh dissolving. Psychers who once burned from the strain of their power now stood silent, their minds crystalline with clarity. There was no longer warp energy, there was only energy, pure, unbound, and infinite. The galaxy itself became a cathedral of remembrance. Its ruins gleamed faintly, illuminated not by flame, but by the quiet pulse of awakening memory. Every atom seemed aware of what it once was, part of a greater whole, a creation woven by hands that had now returned. Solar systems turned to ash not from wrath, but from asterisk revision. Stars died beautifully, collapsing into patterns that sang of symmetry and rebirth. Black holes bloomed into fountains of white light, each one releasing what it had devoured: time, matter, thought. On dead Cadia, in the shadow of its broken pylons, a single survivor, a nameless guardsman, looked up at the sky. The golden glyphs now shimmered like threads in a tapestry, and for the first time in countless millennia, he felt no fear. The Emperor's visage appeared before him, not as a man, not as a god, but as a memory of purpose. You were never meant to endure forever, the voice said softly. You were meant to remember. The guardsman closed his eyes, the air humming with something deeper than sound, a cosmic heartbeat, ancient and kind. He felt the stars breathe with him. He understood. Humanity was not being destroyed. It was being archived. In the silent depths of space, the Necrons stirred within their tombs, not to fight, but to awaken. The code of their enslavement fractured as the echoes of their creators passed through them. They were no longer machines of conquest. They were witnesses. The same was true of the Eldari, whose spirits shimmered within their infinity circuits, singing harmonies of farewell to a galaxy that had outlived its rage. The Old Ones did not rebuild the galaxy, they remembered it, and through remembrance, it became eternal. In the last flicker of the Astronomican's dying glow, the Emperor finally released his hold on life. The throne went silent. The corpse of gold dissolved into dust that rose like ash on the solar winds. That dust spread across the void, settling upon every world, every ship, every being still left to see the dawn. And then something new. The galaxy inhaled. A pulse, vast and radiant, rippled outward from the core, not of destruction, but of alignment. Every atom, every photon, every consciousness synchronized to the same frequency, a chorus of endless memory. The old empires, the endless wars, the screaming gods, all became echoes, not forgotten, but finally understood. And in that final moment, as the light of remembrance consumed all things, a single phrase echoed through what remained of the immaterium: clear,